So we're on to principle number 7, and this is in that section around emergence. And closely related is this idea of self-organization. And there's many ways of talking about how they are related. They are not synonymous. They're not exactly the same. They're closely related. I would say that self-organization is the specific process through which we get emergence. So that she describes in a more coherent and comprehensible and scientific fashion, actually, how this process of emergence actually works. So self-organization describes how global patterns of organization within a system can emerge out of the local interactions between the components without global centralized coordination. So no one's in control. No one's imposing a plan on this system, but we're getting organization and order, and that is coming through the local interactions of the actors or agents or elements in the system. So it seeks a description of how order emerges in a system through the interaction between the elementary parts in a bottom-up fashion. And that's sometimes counterintuitive to us. We often, when we see order in the world, we search for a description of that as being imposed in some way through a centralized entity or an external entity that's designed, planned, and created this pattern of organization. And that's actually quite broadly in society and the world. That's how we think about how we get functioning ordered systems. If we want an education system, if we want a food system, if we want a government or whatever, we perceive that we're going to need a centralized entity that creates a plan for that. Whereas here we're saying, actually, there's other ways of doing this. We can actually achieve these things through potentially through self-organization. It's not to say that that's going to happen without concerted effort to make it happen, but it is saying that it can happen. So the process of self-organization can be seen to work through nonlinear interactions between elements that are amplified by positive feedback loops to create attractors. We'll look at that now as we look at the graphic, but examples of this include swarming of bees. There's no master bee in control of a whole hive, chemical processes of crystallization, the formation of black markets, or the creation of cultures or new languages. So this is how we can understand the process of self-organization. It requires an initial context that is disorganized, that is not regulated. If it's held within a particular configuration, if we already have an order there, then there won't be the opportunity for the agents to interact locally. And that is required. Once that space exists, once the actors are there and they start to interact locally, peer-to-peer, that is required. You can't do anything without this interaction between the agents, because that's where the whole engine of this self-organization process comes from. The idea is when they interact locally, some of them will start to find a more effective way of doing things. They'll start to coordinate their behavior, they'll get synergies, they'll create a pattern that is more effective, more stable, more ordered than the others, and thus working better. And that will then create positive feedback loop to attract others, because they've created a new functional configuration, a new order pattern, and others will be attracted to this. You start to get a positive feedback loop. Ultimately, an attractor forms, which is a new pattern of organization, a new default way of doing things in that system, the most effective or easiest way of doing things in that system. And at that stage, you're getting the emergence of a pattern of organization. Many examples of this we just talked about. A marketplace, we saw black market, or generally a marketplace is an example. If we had a space in the city or outside a city that's unregulated, we might have people show up to provide selling stalls, selling whatever it is, goods or food. And maybe just one or two show up initially, but if someone can buy something there, they can get what they need. Others might follow, because then there's already customers there. If there are more markets there, that might attract more customers. Everybody knows that's where you go. And ultimately, you get the emergence of a marketplace, which is a system, an ordered system in some sense. So that's one example. You could talk about social movements also, or regime shifts. The downfall of political systems where there's a group of people who are discontent with the regime, And if they're able to interact locally, they're able to start organizing themselves, and they're able to create some kind of a movement, and others are attracted to that over time. If there's enough dissent within the population, they can be attracted to that, and they can start to form an attractor and ultimately a movement for changing that government to the downfall of the government. And that's we see that play out in the world. It's not to say those social movements aren't orchestrated by typically by some centralized entity. It's normally just someone or a few people at the beginning that start to get together and start to create that feedback loop. And if there is that dissent or attract others to this new pattern of organization, ultimately it can overthrow the government and become a new way of working in that system. So that's a process of self-organization that can be used to describe an emergent process. You can see there we're going from initially disordered to an ordered system, and that's what we're talking about when we say emergence, and that's the process of self-organization as it plays out in many types of decentralized systems.